you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, René Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Welcome to She Became Visible. It is December 29th, 2024. I cannot believe how fast this year has gone by. It certainly has. I can never figure out, because I'm looking at a different camera. I'm not looking at the camera on my computer, but I'm looking at you. So there we go. So today I'm going to be closing out the year of She Became Visible with my pledge to leave Mormonism alone. And it's going to be very difficult. I think 2025 is going to be a remarkable year for the Mormon Church. And I'm sure a lot of things are going to happen. And I'm sure that there are a lot of things that I'm going to be ranting and raving about. But I don't want that to be my main focus in this podcast, She Became Visible, because I am surrounded by so many wonderful podcasters and influencers who take on the subject of Mormonism, and they do it so well. I feel as though I am just an echo of everything that's already being said. So in the ways of John Larson and Gina Colvin, I'm deciding to put Mormonism aside because I also want to really address, and here's the conflicting thing. The word Mormon is not going to be eliminated from my vocabulary when I do this podcast because it was a part of my life. We spend half of the year in Utah. So I am surrounded by Mormonism, the culture, the people, the visual. I am surrounded by Mormonism. And so I cannot totally escape the subject. But what I want to address is the conflict of women, especially over the age of 50, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as they now want to be known as. The only people that call them members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. All right. The entire world is still addressing this religion as Mormonism, and they will continue to address it as Mormonism, in spite of what Russell Nelson has decided, that it is a vote for Satan if we do that. Nobody believes that. Okay. You can't take away 200 years of a name and an association and expect it to just go away with the declaration of a 100-year-old man. Members of the church who are obedient and do everything that they're told have accepted this. They're trying to stand on their rock, on their soapbox, and correct people when they say it. But the world is looking at them going, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not going to say that. It's too long. We know who you are. You're Mormons. All right. All right. So that's the way it goes. But so what I want to concentrate on with my podcast is the women in this religion who, even if you want to stay, even if you still want to hang on to your beliefs, there still needs to be a recognition of your autonomy, of your worth, of your value. And that is the purpose of She Became Visible. I'm trying to encourage women to take back their soul, to take back their purpose and recognize their worth. And I'm not asking them to abandon their faith, abandon their families, abandon their values or their morals. I don't wish them to do that. I don't think anyone should do that. But I do think you need to be recognized and given the power and authority to take back your own lives. And that is the purpose of She Became Visible. Now, one of the important things about taking back your life is taking back your health. And so that's what I'm primarily going to be concentrating on this year on She Became Visible, is how to take back your health. Part of that is controlling stress. Every health YouTube that you listen to, they're going to address stress. And I can't think of anything more stressful than a continual role of motherhood throughout your entire life. Even when you have completely raised a gaggle of children and you have done it well, you devoted your life and your time to making sure that these little humans had the best possible environment that they could. And you did it, and you did it so well. But now you are being asked to continue that role as nurturer, as caregiver, and that role may take on the look of being a grandmother. It may take on the role of being an auntie or a caregiver for a member of the family. And so you never are able to escape that designated position that was given to you by other people. And so that's where I'm asking you to just sit back and say, I love you. I love all of you. I love my religion. I believe in the Mormon church and the doctrine. However, I also believe that I am a person that has a purpose and a value, and I would like to contribute to this world for how many years I have left in my own way, with my own decisions being made. And so that is the purpose and the goal of She Became Visible. Now, I thought it would be funny. You know, there are so many. One of the things that RFK Jr. is suggesting is that we take away commercials for pharmaceuticals from our television. Now, they already do this in Europe. In Europe, they do not allow you to advertise pharmaceuticals the way they do in America, and it is constant. And of course, every show that knows their demographics are advertising according to their demographics. So if you watch 60 Minutes or Good Morning America or any of those shows, they know who's watching. And most of the people that are watching are 50 and above. And so there are a lot of medications that are being advertised. So I thought it would be a little bit funny if I included some of the narratives that they give on those commercials with the new She Became Visible format. So here I go. Here's my commercial for She Became Visible. Imagine a life with more energy, fewer aches, and a brighter outlook. Introducing She Became Visible, the once daily tablet designed to help you rediscover the best version of yourself. Whether it's climbing that extra flight of stairs, playing with your grandkids, or simply enjoying a walk in the sunshine, She Became Visible is here to help. Now, She Became Visible isn't for everyone. Do not take She Became Visible if you are allergic to it or any of its ingredients. Before starting She Became Visible, tell your doctor if you have a history of heart, liver, or kidney issues, or if you are pregnant or planning to become pregnant. Side effects may include headache, dizziness, dry mouth, and in rare cases, a spontaneous interpretive dance. Stop listening to She Became Visible immediately. if you experience excessive euphoria, uncontrollable laughter, or the sudden urge to adopt a llama. There may be signs of a rare but serious condition known as leaving the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I thought that was funny. Don't you love those commercials? How do you know if you're allergic to it unless you've already taken it? And once you've already taken it and you have an allergic reaction, then you're probably not going to be taking it anymore. They're so crazy. But some of the warnings on these medications are absolutely frightening. Anyway, so today I'm going to be saying goodbye to my anti-Mormon rants by ranting. All right. And what I want to do is start out by telling you, and let me make sure I'm there. And what I want to make sure is I want to explain my journey, how I decided to resign my membership from the Mormon Church. Now, I was a member of the church from the time that I was 12 when my parents, my stepfather and my mother joined the church, and my brother, who is 3 years older than I am, and I were also baptized. He was 15, I was 12. We didn't really have a choice. And of course, as a 12-year-old girl who was absolutely boy crazy, I thought these young missionaries that were coming over to the house were the bee's knees. I mean, they were just like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Yes, bring on 2 more, please. And so, and it was interesting because I think I've mentioned this before. There was a family, the bishop of the ward that we were being baptized into had a very handsome son. And he actually baptized me. So I was just like, oh, this is fabulous. So that's where I was at 12 years old. But I jumped into it because I immediately met my best friend at church, and she and I were inseparable. She just lived down the street. There weren't a lot of members of the church at my school, and she and I hung out together, did everything together, talked on the phone, and it was glorious. It was absolutely glorious. Then when I was 17 years old, my father got transferred to the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in just south of Chicago. And so the great thing about the church is when you move, you already have a built-in community. You already have friends that are commanded to love you and take you in. And so I met 3 new best friends. Unfortunately, they attended a different high school, and I was the only person in my little gang, in my girl group, that went to this particular high school that I graduated from. And so, but they were all bridesmaids in my weddings, and we all got married the same year, and we all had a large family between 5 and 6 children, and it was great. It was a wonderful, and I was completely absorbed in the church. It was everything in my life, my friends, my activities, what I did with my children, how I raised my children. It was everything. And if you listen to a lot of the podcasts and influencers who have left the church, they will talk about things that made them go, And one of the things that is very strong and big in the ex-Mormon world is temple experiences. How they went to the temple for the first time and they were like, "Wait, what?" And that wasn't my experience because I was raised in a home that kind of already believed in the woo-woo stuff. There were a lot of beliefs in ghosts and spirits, and the Methodist faith that I was raised in before I was 12, I already had a strong belief in Jesus Christ. And my family, a lot of families played board games. My family played the Ouija board. And so I was not uncomfortable with this. I also love Halloween. I love costumes. And so the whole temple experience for me was one big Halloween party with ghosts and ancestors on the other side. And it was like, woo, this is fabulous. That's how I took it. And so Joseph Smith and angels I never thought of it as anything but a spiritual experience. And so what really started to crack my faith was my experience with patriarchy. As I grew and as I developed and as my frontal cortex developed and I began to question the men who had authority over me, who had authority over my husband and my family and my children. And I recognized them as flawed individuals, but they had a lot of power and they had a lot of respect. And there was a lot of times when I was like, you're not a good man. And everyone knows you're not a good man. And yet, why are you the stake president? Those kinds of questioning. So the beginning of my leaving the church began with this book, David O. McKay, The Rise of Mormon Modernism. Now, this is a book written by Gregory A. Prince. Fabulous, fabulous man. Let me show you a little bit. I'm going to get back to this later, but Gregory Prince is an American pathology researcher, businessman, author, social critic, and historian of the Latter-day Saint movement. If you're not familiar with Greg Prince, he's written this fabulous book, David O. McKay. He's also written this fabulous book, Gay Rights and the Mormon Church. I highly recommend that you read that. And he's written quite a few other books. And I read Greg Prince's book because I was starting in about 2020, I was starting to hear about John Dehlin and Mormon stories. But being a faithful member, I was not going to listen to anti-Mormon things. So I thought, well, if I'm going to listen to John Dehlin, I'm going back. I'm going back to some of his broadcasts from 2015 when he first got started. And I think it was even earlier than that. And Greg Prince was one of his first guests. Now, at that time, John Dehlin was still a member of the church. So his podcasts, his Mormon stories, were very apologetic. And I thought, well, this is great. I need to hear the other side. And so I listened to the interview that he had with Greg Prince, and then I bought the book. And as I read this book and I saw behind the curtain of how these men in authority worked, everything crashed because I realized, oh, this is a man-made religion ruled by men who change their minds, who are very much influenced by what's going on in the world culturally. And they might be loving, kind, good men, but they are not gods. And a lot of times, what the doctrine that they so-called receive through revelation is their own personal bias and their own personal opinion. And so that is how my testimony and my belief in the church began to break down. So it wasn't the temple ceremony. It wasn't a lot of the other teachings per se. It literally was the patriarchy that brought me down. Now, some of the other books that I read, once that mindset was open to me, I began to read and read and read. House of Females was a really great book that I read, and it opened up my eyes to the truth behind polygamy, that it wasn't a joyous thing, that it wasn't necessarily revealed to Joseph Smith through God, because it was very one-sided, it was very patriarchal, and it served the men in the church, and the women who are glorious, lovely, kind, beautiful people were taken advantage of and went along with it. And they suffered greatly. A Wife Number 19 was another book that I read. Outside of Mormonism, I read Sue Monk Kidd, The Dance of the Dissident Daughter. She lost her faith in the evangelical church, and that was a beautiful book to read. I also, because of Greg Prince's book about David O. McKay, I was really touched by Matthew Harris's book, Watchman on the Tower, all about Ezra Taft Benson. If you are questioning patriarchy, or if you are questioning how the church really works, you need to read these books about these men, how there is a huge cover-up, how there are huge non-disclosure type activities where these men they try to hide what they teach because they are leaders in the church, and they can't go against what they're saying because this man became a prophet. But in the 60s he was not the prophet, but they can't disregard his conference talks and the things. They just tried to push him aside and make him go away. And that, I learned, was how the church works. They change things, they don't talk about it, they just make them go away. And people who are true believers just continue to accept this. Like, we don't believe that anymore. Oh, okay. I don't know why we don't believe it, but the prophet said we don't. Therefore, I too will no longer believe it. So I want to bring on, this is another great book that I really see. This was written by a very faithful member of the church, Charles Harrell. This is My Doctrine. He just goes through Mormon theology. He talks about it. That was a fabulous book. And of course, Benjamin Park, my new favorite, American Zion. And then I read his other book, Kingdom of Nauvoo. These are beautiful historians who, what I love about historians, Greg Prince, Benjamin Park, Matthew Harris, what I love about them is they don't have an opinion. They are historians. They literally are bringing you historical facts. And the thing that I love about outside people like Christopher Hitchens, is they talk about, you can have your biases, you can have your beliefs, but you cannot dismiss historical facts. Now, they acknowledge how history works. They acknowledge that they can only go through the sources, and we don't have we don't have videotapes of Jesus doing the Sermon on the Mount. We don't have people with their cameras, recording Jesus talking. We have to rely on history, and history is flawed, and history can be changed, and they acknowledge that. And that's the other thing that I love, is when you can acknowledge changes and you can acknowledge mistakes, that's truth to me. So this is where my testimony of the church began to break down. Now, let me start out with this. I thought this was kind of funny.
Who knew that one of the candidates that you're contemplating voting for believed that in the 19th century, a man called Joseph Smith dug up some golden tablets, which he translated and then conveniently lost? A 19th century man translated them into 17th century English. If the person you're contemplating voting for believes that the Garden of Eden was in Missouri, believes that Native Americans are the lost 10 tribes of Israel, believes that Jesus visited North America, these beliefs are barking mad.
I love that. And, as a former member of the church, and I've heard a lot of other people say this as well, you do kind of look back and go, wow, I really did believe that. And it's absolutely fascinating. Now, I listened to a fabulous YouTube yesterday, and it was all about the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah? They pronounced it a little bit differently. Kabbalah, I think they pronounced it. And the mysticism of Judaism, and how Joseph Smith was absolutely entranced. He worked with a mystic, a Jewish rabbi, and he was learning. He actually got accredited through a program that was taught by this Jewish rabbi who was really into mysticism, and how the combination of the Jewish mysticism and the Masonic program, which they pointed out that every white male in the 19th century was a member of the Mason practically, and how that was also an influence. And when you start to learn these things and you throw away the garbage that we were told, oh no, the temple is simply a restoration of Solomon's ceremony in the temple. You're like, no, it wasn't. And you find that out and you go, oh, that was a lie. So how many that was a lies can you listen to before you go, oh, I think the whole thing might be a lie? But I want to talk to you. I want to just give you a little taste of some of the things that I learned when I threw away my belief in a man-made program and started to understand how theology in general works and how religion in general works. And I want to start out with a little philosophy by Nietzsche. All right. Let's talk about Nietzsche and his teachings of religion. So I'm going to bring you.
The concept of the master and slave morality is central to Nietzsche's 1887 book, The Genealogy of Morals. In this book, Nietzsche outlines two types of morality that have their origin in the ancient world. The first is master morality, in which an aristocratic class designates itself as good and then, as an afterthought, designates the outsiders to that aristocracy, the plebeians, the barbarians, the foreigners, as bad. This mode of moral valuation is therefore what Nietzsche calls self-legislating. The master morality's core concepts are good and bad, not good and evil. The master morality begins from the valuation. What I am is good, what is equal to me is good, and whatever is beneath me is not even worth consideration.
Now, I want to stop right there and just point out that one of the biggest things that we were taught when my family was taking the missionary discussions was that the Mormon church is the only true church living on the earth, that it was restored through Joseph Smith, that it was the only true church set up the way Jesus Christ set his church up to be. And so we were the good, everyone else were the bad. Now, I take that and I also bring it to the aristocratic feel of the quorum of the 12, the 15, the apostles, how those men are primarily lawyers, doctors, very successful businessmen. They're very wealthy men with letters behind their names that give them credibility, and they are looked on as people that are better. They are the aristocratic ruling government of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I associate what Nietzsche is describing here with the authorities over the church.
Apart from our modern notion of evil, what the master morality calls bad is not to be fought or contested with. It is simply disregarded. Nietzsche's example of this mode of valuing is the pagan Greek, who celebrated physical beauty, worldly accomplishment, and wealth. For them, arrogance, ambition, and cunning were not vices, but virtues. The slave morality originates with the underclass. Their moral designations are essentially externally directed. The slave morality's core concepts are good and evil, or to speak more precisely, evil and then good. They begin with the designation evil, and apply this designation to all those they find to be harmful or terrifying. For the slave morality, good is the secondary consideration, the afterthought. The good man is the harmless man, the one you do not have to worry about. The primary feeling driving the slave morality is resentment. Resentment is the inner state of someone who is harmed, threatened, or coerced, but who cannot defend themselves or repay the harm done. In other words, a state of impotence. The definitive example of this mode of valuation is the Christian slave in ancient Rome. The Christian religion imagines a revenge against their worldly oppressors in hell or on Judgment Day. And this is precisely because the slaves could never accomplish such a revenge in the real world.
Okay, so I want to bring that out a little bit too. When I first heard this concept of the slave mentality, I immediately, of course, associated with the beautiful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because you will often hear people say, I left the church, I loved the people. And the people in the church have this slave mentality. I like how he said it's an impetus. Impetus, did I pronounce that correctly? That they have no power over their lives. So they are truly the slaves of the aristocratic people in Utah who have told them, given them their values, told them what they need to do, clean the church every Saturday, give us 10% of your income, go and serve us for free on your dime, serve us in countries all over the world for free. Send your children, give us your children for free. You pay for it. You give us your children. And so there is this slave mentality where you don't have any power over what you choose to do. If you choose not to pay tithing to the royalties, then you will be punished and you will not be able to enter the sacred temples that only the elite, perfect members of the church can go into, even though it's taught that those temple ordinances are necessary for your salvation and for your relatives who have already passed on for their salvation. You are not allowed to go in unless you pay us, unless you give us your money. So members of the church are truly the slaves of this system that was set up to make you work for them, and they will tell you what your value is.
Sum up. For Nietzsche, the strong will inevitably create one set of values out of their strength, and the weak will create an opposing set of values out of their weakness. It is often said that Western civilization originates out of the marriage of Athens and Jerusalem, and thus does Nietzsche argue that the modern Westerner thinks in terms of both types of morality, to varying degrees, even though these two modes of thought are mutually exclusive. Now, there is a lot more to this idea, and if you're looking for an in-depth examination of the master and slave morality.
Okay, so when I first heard this, one of the other things that was interesting was the whole value system of forgiveness, turn the other cheek. A lot of the teachings that are written as teachings from Jesus Christ are slave mentality. Because the Jews were persecuted, they adopted these values so that they could be better. We're better than the ruling class because we forgive, we turn the other cheek, we allow you to treat us poorly because we're good people, and that's what good people do. And that's what I see in the church. Is I see good, wonderful, dedicated people giving up their time, their talents, their money, and everything for the anointed royals in Utah, for the system of the corporation, because they don't have any power to not do that. But the reality is they do. But they have been indoctrinated. And there are so many generations that people know what a sacrifice it will be if they leave the church. And they will lose a lot. Some people will lose a lot. So other people like me did not lose anything, really. But some people lose everything. And it is a huge sacrifice for them to leave this system that has been set up. So that is one of the things that I wanted to share with you. Now, let me get this out of the way so I can bring this up. Okay, so I want to talk to you. The other thing that this 2024 was such a high-charged political year. And of course, with Donald Trump, there was a lot of talks of authoritarianism and fascism and that whole mentality. And I really associated a lot of the things that were being said about Trump with how the Mormon church is set up in an authoritarian way, with a leader, with a fascist leader, that we are all told how we can worship. I even watched some shows where, especially in the, I was watching a lot of the things with Syria and with Saudi Arabia and all of the stuff that's going on over there, watching how these Saudi Arabian princes greet each other. They literally are, the kissing is amazing how much kissing goes on. And in the Mormon church, there is still a lot of kissing. It's just kind of hidden. And then there are people like David Bednar who require you to kiss him, metaphorically at least, by standing when he enters the room and not standing until he again stands up, and little things like that that he requires. But the celebration of Russell Nelson on his 100th birthday, the kissing and the kissing of the ring is so obvious in the Mormon church. I mean, I don't know why we don't just give these guys cone-shaped hats and robes, because Mormons literally worship these people as spokespeople for God. So let's talk a little bit about fascism.
I mean, I think people can be fascists without having total power, right? I mean, Mussolini had to deal with the king for a while. He had to deal with parliament for a while. You know, Trump also had to deal with Congress for a while. So you can be a fascist without there being a fascist system, right? You can try to get to power, and doesn't mean you're going to succeed getting into power, and I think that's Trump, right? But the most meaningful part of Trump from the first time, which I don't think people necessarily remember, is all the lying. And if you're a Trump supporter, it's hard to remember that because you probably believe the lies. And if you believe the lies, you can't remember them as lies.
Right.
And the most important lie, of course, was the lie that he won the last election, which was a big fascist scale lie. He clearly crossed the threshold there.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in.
And the moment his supporters used violence, and he supported them for using violence to stay in power, he was crossing another really big threshold. But all that said, I think, with this is unfortunately that passage just prologue for what can come next.
Okay. When you believe the lies, you forget that they were lies. And that's what I see the Mormon Church right now is struggling. They are losing membership because we have the internet. We have access to truth. We have access through fabulous historians, as I showed you. We have books like this that are acknowledging truths. And so the lies are being unveiled. And so it's frustrating for me to listen to people who, when the church changes its doctrine, they completely just make it out. It's the greatest. Honestly, if you wanted to study gaslighting, you should study the Mormon Church, because they have perfected this skill, this tool called gaslighting, because they will change their doctrine, they change their belief, they publish it in a handbook, they send the handbook out, the people read the handbook as scripture, and they accept it unquestionably, which is frightening. So the perfect example for that is this, as I mentioned in my last podcast, the church alternates every year studying one of their scriptures. So we just, I gotta stop saying we. The Mormon Church just completed the Book of Mormon in 2024. In 2025, they will be studying the Doctrine and Covenants. Now, this was written by Joseph Smith. And if you don't believe that a 19th century man wrote scripture in 17th century English and that he was just an unlearned farm boy, then you need to go back and read the Doctrine and Covenants, because this is the same person that wrote the Book of Mormon. And so they're going to be studying this. And so in preparation for this study, they have come out with a children's version so that you as a family can sit down and with your children study the Doctrine and Covenants. And one of the subjects that they have to discuss is polygamy. So they came out with this children's version of how to explain polygamy to your children. And it has gotten, I mean, there's an article in I believe it's going to be the Washington Post or the New York Times, because it is so obviously gaslighting and it's lying. And so I talked about this in my last podcast, but we're going to go back. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about this. So let me go back. So this is the new polygamy thing, the cartoon that has been developed to teach your children. And it starts out by saying, while the prophet Joseph was studying the Bible, he read about prophets like Abraham and Moses, who had been married to more than one wife. Joseph wondered. Now, first of all, let's talk about, I mean, we don't have time to talk about, they weren't married. Okay. Marriage in a presentation, a current presentation of what the meaning of marriage is. When you hear the word married, you think of Moses and his wives, or Abraham and his wives, going before a clergy member and being told, do you accept, Rebecca as your wife? Do you accept Leah as your wife? I do. Do you accept Moses as your husband? I do. You are now married in the eyes of God, blah, blah, blah. That's not, it was a property acquisition. All right. It is taking property from the father? Why do you think the tradition in America is you have the father walk the daughter down the aisle and give her away, give her to the husband? This is all the pagan tradition of property being transferred onto the new owner. So stop saying they were married, all right? And so anyway, so that's the beginning of this crazy lie. The Lord said that usually a man should have only one wife, but sometimes the Lord commanded his people to be in marriages of one man and more than one woman. I don't know. Okay. I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's ever been true in America. Maybe in some tribes, okay, in other parts of the world. But in America, at this time, it was illegal to be married to more than one woman. So this starts the whole, anyway, this is the slide presentation that they have for the children now. And so it goes on. Joseph taught the 12 apostles about plural marriage. It was hard. It was really hard for those old men to marry those 15-year-old little girls. Doggone it, even though she really was cute. But they just were doing what God told them to do. And so, it just goes on. In 1890, the Lord told Wilford Woodruff, the president of the church, that men should not marry more than one wife. The leaders of the church shared this commandment with the saints. This is still the Lord's commandment today. Now, if any of you have studied church history, you know that in 1890, that was all a facade. They were trying to become a state and they had to give up polygamy in order to do that. So they put out this fake message to the saints. All right, fine. We won't do polygamy anymore. Okay. Will you make us a state? All right, go down to Mexico and start your own community. You go up to Canada, get as many women as you can. We are not stopping this polygamy thing, but we don't tell anybody. It's a secret. Okay. That should be part of the Mormon. Everything that they say should start out by saying it's a secret. Okay. Because it was illegal and it was fake. It took, I think it was in 1920 before they finally came out and said, fine, we won't do polygamy anymore, but we'll do it in the next life. We'll do it in heaven. We'll show you. And so it's anyway, but again, the beautiful Benjamin Park addressed this, why the church can't let go of polygamy, because they put it in their freaking scriptures. All right. So anyway, so that's the new brouhaha, but that's a perfect example of the gaslighting. When they have to change policies or doctrine, they will create a program that convinces people that, no, what are you talking about? We've always taught that you weren't going to have your own planet. What? Nobody ever said you were going to have your own planet. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So anyway, so this is a perfect example of the patriarchy. These are the men. These are the councils sitting in Utah going, dang, what are we going to do? We've got to convince the world that we don't believe that. What are you talking about? We're fine. We're just Christian. We just believe in Jesus. We don't believe in that other stuff. We never taught that. And the members of the church are just swallowing it. They are gulping down this Kool-Aid like, yeah, we love Jesus. Jesus is our new king. We love, woohoo, Jesus. We're going to start singing Jesus music. What? We weren't allowed to sing Jesus music before? Well, maybe you didn't, but Russell Nelson loves a guitar on stage in sacrament meeting. We never told you couldn't have a guitar. People, this is what I'm talking about. This is what drove me to go, this is all a lie. This is all a lie. Now, let me go on. Now, this is one of the best. If you don't have anything else to do today, I suggest you get on YouTube and watch this tribute to Christopher Hitchens. And Christopher Hitchens, when I found him after I left the church, he was such a breath of fresh air. Just listening to someone, first of all, he's so eloquent, and his accent and his use of language is so beautiful that I could listen to him all day long. And he passed away in 2011. And so this, and it was like December 14th, 2011. And so this was a tribute that was just done for him. And there were a lot of really great things that were brought up. So let's put this on stage.
Hello, and welcome to a special holiday edition of the Origins podcast. I'm your host, Lawrence Krauss. This episode contains the video of a very special event that happened December 14th at the Royal Geographical Society in London. There, we celebrated the life of the remarkable Christopher Hitchens, and I did it with three remarkable people on stage with me: Stephen Fry, Richard Dawkins, and Douglas Murray. At that event, we celebrated Christopher's life through a series of reminiscences and then an open dialogue between all of us about modern topics, trying to reflect on the thoughts Christopher would have about what's going on in the world today. And after that, we took questions from the audience. It was a remarkable evening, celebrating a remarkable man. Christopher was a beacon of light in a world that was dark even then, and maybe having gotten darker since then. And in fact, it was appropriate to celebrate what we call, and by we, I mean the Origins podcast, the Origins Project Foundation, in partnership with Atheist UK and also the How To Academy in London. We celebrated Hitchmas. After all, Christmas really adopts the celebration of the solstice, the pagan celebration of the solstice, bringing back light to the world as the darkest night passed and each day got longer again. And it seemed particularly appropriate to celebrate it for someone who brought such light to the world. I know many of you have been anticipating this video since I first announced the event, and I'm incredibly excited to be able to provide it here for you as a special holiday treat.
Okay, so I'm going to fast forward to the parts that I really loved, and I'm going to give you some quotes that I very quickly tried to write down, so I may not have gotten them directly, but I just thought some of them. So let me fast forward here to one of the first things that I loved. We're going to go to 38. Listen to Stephen Fry. He's so fun to listen to.
Something else. Think about what it is. And in that sense, everything about Christopher was this. Don't trust what you hear, examine it. Find out what the thing itself is that is being talked about, whether it's a war, whether it's an opinion, whether it's a faith, whatever it might be. That he did have one big hole, one huge hole, I thought, in which I was quite pleased which was that he didn't really seem to value or understand that much, and maybe you'll put me right here, about music.
Okay, so what he's saying here, and I love what he said about question everything that you hear. Question everything, whether it's about the war, whether it's about the economy, whether it's about your health, whether it's about the newest diet trend, or the newest exercise program. Question everything and do your research. And that is what I loved. I love that Stephen said that about Christopher. And that's the problem with the church has indoctrinated. People have shown the video 50 million times of people saying, once the prophet has spoken, the discussion is over. And people accept that. And you've got to stop using your beautiful human mind that you've been given the ability to use critical thinking skills. Just investigate. Just look at a few more sources. And so let me keep going here. Where are we at?
And I when he, we were sort of email.
So it was that thing. Question everything. That I wanted to point out. Okay, so some of the quotes talking about original sin. They said, original sin makes us objects in a cruel environment, created sick and demanded to be well. I thought that was beautiful. We were born sinners. Now, I know in the Mormon church that we don't necessarily take on that belief like the Catholic Church does, but we are held responsible for Adam's transgressions, which is completely opposite of what we are taught at other times, that we have free agency, that we can make our own free choices. And yet, in the temple ceremony that I went through before it's been changed 4,000 times, we were held responsible for the sins of Adam and Eve. Women were punished for what Eve did. We will bear children with pain. And the men were punished for Adam not listening to God and listening to Eve. And so he will have to work by the sweat of his brow for the rest of his lives. So we're taught that we're held responsible for Adam and Eve, and yet we're taught we have free agency. And yet we were taught that we were spirit beings that came down to take a body, and that the purpose of taking a body was to be tested. And so we had this free agency that would allow us to decide over good and evil. So it's so confusing. It's so hypocritical so many times. But, and then at one point, Richard Dawkins said that we inherit the sins of Adam the only way to escape is through redemption. And then he said, not to be righteous, but effective, Stephen Fry says. Don't try to be righteous, be effective. And that's where he talks about even Aristotle, when he would acknowledge a problem, he also created a solution. You can't just complain about a problem. You have to come up with a solution as well. Some of the other things, Douglas Murphy said that Christopher's brother said that Christopher had courage, and that was one of his strongest things, was the courage that he had to do and say things. And he said, courage to say what you think, stand up for your friends, and contempt for horse shit. And I think that's the truth. Do you have the courage to stand up for what's right? Do you have the courage to stand up and say, this is horse shit, and I'm not going to do this anymore? I have value as a woman. I have value as a person on this earth. And I'm not going to relinquish that value and be told by a group of men, old men, what I should be doing with the rest of my life. And as I mentioned in my other podcast, the ability to say no is such a beautiful gift. And we need to start using that. When our husbands who have retired, they no longer have in their self-worth given to them every day by employees that told them how wonderful they were. They don't know who they are any longer. And so they are lost. And so they decide, well, we'll just go serve 45 missions, and that will give me back my power, and it will give me back my worth, because I will be a missionary. And if I go on enough missions, maybe I'll be called to be a mission president. And then you, little girl, could be a mission president's wife. Think about that. Then I will have the power, and you can have that baby power that is given to you by me. And that's what we're going to go for now. And that is a continuation of the self-worth that's given to men through power and authority. And so that is the part that is so frightening, that I see these beautiful, talented women that are continually giving up their lives so that their husbands can continually be given power and authority, because that's the only way they can find their value. Now, I had a beautiful stepfather who always served in positions of, he was always the stake clerk. He actually served with President Oaks in the stake when we lived in Illinois. He was the state clerk when President Oaks was the stake president. And he always served in those positions. He preferred that. He did not want to be up at a podium. He really preferred to just be in the back. And he loved organizing things. It was a perfect calling for him. But as he moved and did not have positions of power, he took on, he started building train sets and little villages. And he got with a train group of men who had these trains and the little villages. And he loved that. And he didn't have to be out in the spotlight to find his worth. He just did things that he loved. He started doing woodworking, and he would create things for his grandchildren. And he didn't expect anyone to give him a huge round of applause. He didn't want to be a stake president. He didn't want to be a mission president. He reluctantly served missions because my mother wanted to. But he always enjoyed just being in the background. And there are so few men like that in the church. Another quote, take away the divine truth, and what are you? A densely populated land. He's talking about Israel there, where if right now with the Zionist movement, if you take away the divine claim that the Jews have for being able to take away this land, then what are you? You are going into a densely populated land. So it's not a land without people. Anyway, there were so many great things. I love this other quote that he said, being offended offers no special services. So just because you're offended doesn't make you special. And you don't get any certain rights because you were offended. I thought that was really great. Let me move on to, let me go back to this. Let me move on to, we're going to an hour and 10.
I wanted to touch a bunch of delicate subjects, and we did. And when we were thinking about running this, I thought, well, how can one appropriately celebrate Christopher? And I thought of the three people that I would most admire to do that, and I was so happy that they agreed to be on stage. So we'll take a break now, and we'll thank all of you. And you're going to have to come up with some good questions. Thank you very much. Well, much to my dismay, there were many good questions. It's hard to know where to begin with, but I kind of like this one. This is for everyone. There's some that I'm going to direct to specific people. Free sex, free speech, free association are the three guiding principles of young Hitch. Can any of the panel recommend an appropriate fourth to this trifecta? I thought it's a great question. It's a hard answer. Does anyone
it have to begin with free? Because no, it's interesting because free speech is, of course, and it's a subject we're talking about and we all believe in. But I keep wondering, especially when comparing myself to Americans and our culture in Europe and Britain compared to America, where free speech is the end point. It's what you have to achieve. And for us, free speech is an endpoint because it leads to something which is even more desirable, and that is equity, fairness, justice, decency, peace. All those things are more important, are the most important, and free speech is an absolutely vital step towards them. But
I love that. I love how he talked about in Americans think of free speech as the end all, but in Britain, the British culture looks at free speech as the beginning of freedom of justice, and the end point is free speech. So what is the purpose of free speech? It is for equity, it's for justice, it's for love and kindness for all. And so I love that he pointed that out. So let me go back. There was another one at
Friedman, whatever his name was. So, yeah, it seems to have shrunk and retreated a little back to academia and platform speeches from the idea that it was going suddenly to become a practical, applied study that you could bring to industry.
Right here, he's talking about whether a young person said, should I go into philosophy? I really love philosophy. Should I major in philosophy in college? And so they're talking about whether that's a good profession to go to.
And particularly to the technical sector. That seems to have changed. But I don't know what the question is driving at exactly.
Well, I think he's a young man interested in philosophy.
Yeah,
I mean, study it, I think. And
it's a great subject.
It's a great subject. Yeah. And then you can do physics after that. And have substance.
No, the 17-year-old has to be encouraged to pursue philosophy if it's their passion and if they're good at it, and know that you're dealing with a substance that's fire. And that's a good substance to be dealing with. And I slightly disagree with Stephen's analysis about the free speech and the purpose of it. I don't think that free speech is, I hope I'm not misrepresenting the way you said it, but I don't think it is about arriving at justice and fairness. I think it's simply about arriving at truth. And that truth is the single thing that you should orient yourself towards in your life. whether you're a scientist, a philosopher, a mathematician, whatever else, and that if you see that, and you're lucky enough at the age of 17 to see a way through to do that in your discipline, you should run all the way with it.
I love that. That seeking truth should be your mission. And I love that he said that the greatest thing about philosophy is its fire. That questioning, always questioning and seeking for answers is a fire. And I think that people have confused anger and fire for people that have left the Mormon church. It's not so much that they're angry, they are on fire searching for truth, because once it's been acknowledged that they have been lied to, that the entire corporation is set up under false teachings, then there is a fire where these people want to continually find truth, which is why I had a hard time letting it go in 2024, because there were constantly things that would drive me to search more and more. So I wanted to bring out something else, but I thought that was beautiful what Douglas Murray said. Let me share this one with you. I thought this was hilarious. He's talking on this next one about teachings of religions.
That's the easy stuff. There's no point. One of my other great heroes, Norm Macdonald, always said this. He said, don't do the easy stuff. Anyone can do that. Any stand-up 2-bit comic can do a Donald Trump riff or George W. riff. Find the more interesting, the more difficult, the thing that other people aren't doing. And as for the other bit, what was it again?
Well, there were the election and Christian nationalism.
Christian nationalism. Well, he wouldn't have liked Christian nationalism at all. Nobody will be surprised to hear that. I mean, the interesting thing about the post 9/11 atheism was, of course, is that it really went into the mainstream in such a big way because really violent religion was back in a way that Europe had not had for a long time. And some people said, well, why do you, why do I, why do Christopher, why do Richard, why do others object to this? And I think I can safely say we all said the same thing, which was that if another form of religious nationalism or religious extremism was on our streets trying to behead people, I can absolutely guarantee you we wouldn't be on board with that either. You know, if the Mormons suddenly descended on London and threatened to decapitate everyone who didn't agree with the Book of Mormon, we wouldn't give them a free pass either. It's a general standard.
I love that. I thought that was great. And so, you know, what he's talking about was Islam, and Christopher Hitchens was very much against that religion because of the violence. But I love how he associated that you know, when people outside of the church are talking about these religions, they will talk about Christian Scientists, they will talk about Mormonism, they will talk about Seventh-day Adventists. Mormonism is not just another Methodist religion. It is a violent, controlling, fascist organization that the world recognizes. And so they will address it in the same group as a lot of these others. So that was a very, the other thing that I don't know if I'll be able to explain it, but I wanted to go, and when I'm talking about the church changing its doctrine and then going, we've always done this. What are you talking about? We never said that. This I thought was a very great, let me go back to, this. And see, I have to go back to one. So he's talking about, the question was, who were Christopher Hitchens, some of his favorite authors? And he talked about Orwell and Woodhouse. And he made this, Douglas Murray made this little quote from a book, and it's a fictional book, but I thought it was very good. Okay, listen to this.
At least two of the great parables of the 20th century, which is that's something on its own. Christopher was interested in Orwell in the same way every journalist is interested in Orwell. You just have to be. Woodhouse is just, as Stephen has often written eloquently about, is simply like a bath in the middle of a horrible world. I think Evelyn Waugh said that it's a sort of prelapsarian world where even carnal embrace is not there. None of the characters are sexual in any way. They're sort of delightfully, joyously free of certain of the human constraints. He loved it. I just throw one other in there, though. Christopher, like me, was a huge admirer of Evelyn Waugh and just adored, and we would sometimes do it over lunch or something, compete with reciting passages from some of Waugh's novels because of the sheer ability of Waugh to say things that were incredibly true, but which pierced through every imaginable human folly and also every human decency. I remember there's one passage, and I think it's in Black Mischief or Handful of Dust, where there's a reference to the fact that the natives in a particular area have been moderately civilized by the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church has had to make an agreement because the area in question has been indulging in eating each other for a long time. And so it's explained that the Catholic Church has come to an agreement with them, whereby the consumption of human flesh is not to occur except on occasional feast days, and only then with special dispensation from the bishop. And
when I heard Douglas Murray say this, I was like, oh my gosh, perfect description of what the Mormon Church is doing, because the church is growing in Africa. And why is the church growing in Africa? Because they are offering free internet. They are offering free college through the Pathways program. They are offering free missions where they are paying these boys, paying for them to go on missions, providing their clothing and everything that they need. And they are providing internet at their church buildings. So the native people that live there can go to the church and get on the internet there. And so there's actually programs that are set up where they are literally buying members of the church there. They are giving away so many glorious things. Why wouldn't you sign up for that? And when I listened to the Mormon Land podcast, and they were talking about growth in the church in Africa, and then I heard Douglas Murray make this quote from Evelyn Waugh from her book Black Mischief about how the Catholic Church was trying to work with the natives in Africa, and they were like, oh, you got to stop eating people. It's like, okay, look, how about we come up with this? You can eat people with these special rituals that will be given to you with authorization from the bishops, but only on certain days and certain times. And so they're modifying their doctrine to work with the people. And I thought about this new garment change that is going into effect for people now living in Africa, but will soon be available to certain places of people in 2025, which is all a bunch of garbage. And the reason why they're making these garment changes is because the people in Africa are like, yeah, we're not wearing those. It's hot. We wear dresses down here. And we're not wearing these weird boxer t-shirt combos that you guys have figured out. So the church is like, oh, you're not? Dang it. Okay, I know. Oh, a revelation. We're going to change the design of the garments to accommodate the people that we're actually baptizing, because we're not baptizing anybody in America. Nobody in Ohio is joining the church, but the people in Africa that we're giving them all this free stuff, they're joining the church. So we're going to modify the garments for them. And yet that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, no, I mean, people that live in hot climates, like people have never lived in hot climates before. I mean, come on. But see, the members of the church are like, oh, that's so great. I can wear my tank top now. Yay. Because God said it's okay now. And it's like, oh, please, people. Anyway, I thought that was really great. So I want to just kind of close with the patriarchy really was the main reason why I resigned my membership. And as I close out 2024, the month of December is a it's a hard month for our family. And because our youngest son, that was born December 5th, passed away on Christmas morning, 2022. And so we have, I have a beautiful granddaughter who was also born on Christmas 19 years ago. I have another beautiful daughter who was born on December 3rd. And I had a family tradition where I would never put up the Christmas tree until after her birthday. And I remember decorating the Christmas tree when John Lennon was shot, and I was watching TV late at night. And so there were just, and I remember, you know, when my son was born, we were living in a rental home. We had had a lot of financial issues, but I really wanted to make sure that my children had a good Christmas. And so I knew I was pregnant. He was due on December 23rd. Fortunately, he came early. But I knew I had to have Christmas and everything put in place for my 5 children so that Christmas would still be special for them. I remember when my daughter was born, and we were in a different financial place. We were actually in a rental home because we were building a new home. But I had 2 little boys, and I wanted to make sure that their Christmas was fabulous because I knew she was also due sometime middle of December and came early. So I had to have everything in place. When I went into labor with my 6th child, my son, I remember making sure that my daughter had her fabulous little birthday party with her friends on December 3rd, but not feeling very good. I was not feeling good. And as it turned out, I went into labor that night. So December has always been a stressful time of year, a glorious time of year, but a lot of memories of contrasting feelings. And so I shared that with RFM did a special on Christmas Eve, and he asked people to share stories of what Christmas meant for them. And I wanted to share with you, to close down this podcast, of what I contributed to RFM's Christmas Eve special. It was a beautiful program. It went on for a long time. Of course, people talked longer than he asked everybody to do like 3 minutes. And of course, we're Mormons, right? We know how to talk. And so a lot of people went over that time, but I wanted to share that with you to show you how the patriarchy affected me and how I have never looked back after leaving the church. And I feel very confident in my search for truth and in my decision. So let me play that for you.
The She Became Visible podcast. She has been waiting so patiently. You look fantastic tonight. Renee, how are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much. In fact, I've been waiting so long. One of my earbuds died, so I'm only using one earbud. Power went out.
I totally believe you.
Yeah.
You have been down there a long time. And when I say
I
down
know.
there, I mean where the people I can see are in their little squares.
Exactly. And I want to start out by saying, Bill, today I am so grateful for you bringing me into this community, because this community, I mean, to follow Marty and Lila and Summer and Martine and my sisters in the ex-Zion world is I'm so grateful for the relationships that I have, because you introduced me into this community. And I just want to let you know that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Good job, Bill.
Yeah, it was a cool moment to bring some female voices on and try to sort of even out. I kind of came to my own awareness that I was just perpetuating patriarchy in there. And so I wanted some female voices, and I'm really grateful to have had you on board. So thank you, Renee.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to, I just put down a few thoughts because I wanted to make sure that I stayed under the time. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to share some thoughts that I have with you about this Christmas season. Is that all right?
Please.
Perfect. All right. So I understand the sorrow and grief that so many feel during this season. For all the lights and carols proclaiming December as the most wonderful time of year, it can also be a time of deep loneliness and pain. If you find yourself struggling under the weight of loss or longing, you are not alone. I want to share my story, not to dim the joy and wonder of this season for others, but to reach out to those who may be searching for connection and understanding during this difficult time. The night my son was born, December 5th, was one of the longest of my life. His heart rate had begun to dip, and what was meant to be a routine delivery turned into an emergency cesarean. When he came into the world struggling
to breathe. The doctors discovered a hole in his diaphragm, a diagnosis that was given to him when I was still in my drug-induced coma. He needed emergency surgery, and before I could hold him, he was rushed to Oregon Health Science Hospital while I remained in a different hospital, tethered to my own recovery. At home, life didn't pause. My other 5 children, ages 9 to 2, needed stability, love, and the promise of Christmas magic. My husband, serving on the Stake High Council, balanced his demanding role with the chaos that had become our reality. I lay alone in the hospital that first night, pain from surgery mingling with the ache in my chest. Down the hall, carolers' voices floated through the away in a manger. The irony wasn't lost on me. I too had a newborn I couldn't cradle, a child fighting for his life. Can you still hear me?
Yes, there was just a
Okay,
brief
okay.
place where we didn't hear the beginning of that one line.
Okay, because my other earbud just died. The irony was lost on me. I too had a newborn I couldn't cradle, a child fighting for his life. No one from our ward or stake visited or offered to help with childcare, so I did what I had to. I endured. When I finally brought my baby boy home after a month in the NICU, life picked up at full speed. I was in the pews every Sunday with 6 children in tow, serving in the Young Women's Program while my husband continued his callings and demanding career. December became a whirlwind of birthdays, my eldest daughter on the 3rd, my miracle son on the 5th, and holiday preparations. His severe cerebral palsy, cortical blindness, and wheelchair dependency were challenges we accepted. We folded him into every family vacation, wedding, and celebration, determined to give him a life as full as his siblings. 6 years ago, retirement brought us to Arizona. For the first time, we hired a caregiver who gave us a glimpse of what empty nest life might have been. But caregiving never truly paused, and medical challenges loomed, particularly after a botched surgery during COVID. On Christmas morning 2 years ago, my son took his last breath in my arms. The fire department, 911 services, and neighbors showed kindness, but the church was silent. I had resigned my membership earlier that year, a decision that rendered me invisible in the eyes of leadership. The bishop called my husband, but not me. Despite the absence of institutional support, our family pressed forward, honoring our son's memory. His life was woven into ours, and though his absence left a void, the love we shared remains unshaken. I end this with empathy and understanding. Losing a community because of a faith crisis is so fundamentally contrary to any belief in a loving Father in heaven or the idea of a communal family. To lose a loved one and at the same time, the belief in an eternal family, a system centered on a benevolent and sacrificial atonement, leaves a void that is almost impossible to fill. It creates space for a profound sense of delusionment, especially during a month dedicated to peace on earth and goodwill to men. If you feel the weight of loss, loneliness, or isolation this season, you just know that you are seen. My story is not unique, but perhaps in sharing it, I can extend a hand to those who feel adrift. But remember, you are not alone. And as I said, this community, and I really would encourage all of you to reach out to the ex-Mormon community if you have deconstructed your religion and you are suffering with the idea that maybe the idea of an eternal family is not truth and you feel even more alone. I want you to know that you can find peace in this ex-Mormon community, thanks to people like Bill and RFM.
Thank you so much, Renee. That
You're
was
so
absolutely
welcome.
gorgeous. You're wonderful.
And I just wanted to share, this is a book that I wrote in 2016, Heaven Sent and Bent. That's my guy right there. And it's just a collection of essays that I wrote about how much I really enjoyed being a mother and the experiences that I had mothering a child that was wheelchair dependent, fed through a G tube, cortically blind, and the laughter, the things that would happen with my other children, and the joy that he brought to his siblings. It was just a fun collection to make. And so every time there is some kind of sorrow, just remember that you can find joy.
Where can people get your book?
You can get it on Amazon. It's still available.
And once again, it's called what?
It's called Heaven Sent and Bent.
So that was a wonderful opportunity that RFM gave me to share my December feelings. And I wanted to let you know that my book, Heaven Sent and Bent, that I wrote in 2016, I wrote this at a time when I was still a true believing member of the church. And I tried to write this book with a religious faith inspired feeling behind it. But it was funny because my editor, she could kind of tell that there was a little bit of hypocrisy going on. She would say, now, who is your audience again? Who are you trying to reach again? And, and so she really, but I found as I went through and wrote the stories that it wasn't so much faith-based as experience-based. Like, for example, the topics of my leopard print tights at the temple, I want to go on maternity leave, me and Janet Jackson, that's chapter 5. So it really isn't really faith so much, but let me see if I can, I want to read a little bit. Let's see if this is the chapter. The story about me and Janet Jackson was, do you remember when Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake did their halftime show at the Super Bowl, and supposedly her top came down and exposed part of her breasts, and that was a big brouhaha. So what I talk about in the book is the story about how I was trying to lift and carry my son into the swimming pool. We were on vacation, and this particular swimming pool at the resort that we were staying at had a wheelchair accessible lift that you could put the person in and it would lower them into the water. And so I'm carrying my son to this, and I'm placing him on the lift, and I'm trying to get him strapped in. And because of his cerebral palsy, he had the spastic version. He was extremely stiff and spastic. And he couldn't sit up by himself. So I'm trying to hold him up with one arm and buckle him in with the other. And my swimming suit got pulled down and just exposed me to the entire swimming pool at the pool. And so that's where the association was. But, it's like, I don't care. I got to get him in the water. I got to get him, he wants to enjoy the relief of the swimming pool as much as the rest of us did. So that was my example with that. And then I talked about, it's funny. I actually, I self-published this book, but then I gave it to Cedar, what's the name of that book? There's a publishing company, Cedar something. And I sent it to them, and they wrote back and they said, we would love to publish your book, but there's a couple things in there that we can't publish. And I wrote back and I said, well, what's that? And they said, well, that one of them was that story of me exposing my breasts to the swimming pool. The other thing was I told the story of how when my daughter was born, I had 2 little boys. They were 4 and 2 years old. And my oldest son has always been a free spirit. And he decided he wanted to go to the park, which was just up the road. And he took off and he just went. And here I am with a 2-year-old and a brand new baby. And I'm looking for my son. And I realized he probably went to the park. I knew him, right? And so I had to pack up everybody. And it was December. She was born in December. So I had to pack up everybody, put him in the car, take him down to the park, try to find him. And it was just chaos, right? That's just the chaos that a mother experiences. They said they couldn't publish that because it was, a mother had lost control over her child, and they couldn't publish that. And then the other thing was I had associated Pinterest with Satan, because I said, whatever happened to the simple birthday cake that moms used to make? Now we have to have fondant and the Eiffel Tower in 3D for a birthday cake, or it's not acceptable anymore. And because I used the word Satan and I associated Pinterest with Satan, those were the 3 reasons why they couldn't publish the book. So I thought that was hilarious because this was a church associated publishing company. So that's why they said that. But, one of my favorite chapters in this book is the story that I talk about when our grandson came to live with us. And he also carries on the beautiful trait that my family has of hyperactivity, which is why we get things done, right? And so I went to a school council meeting with his teachers, right? And we had him in our home from the time that he was about 18 months until he was about 8 years old. He lived with us, and so I'm continuing my mothering, going to school meetings, teacher meetings, and things with him. And I just remember them kind of looking at his reports and going, "What are we going to do?" And I was like, "Oh, please." I mean, and the teachers would start asking questions about, well, have you tried maybe just sending him to his room and telling him that we'll start again tomorrow? And I said, you obviously have never had a child with attention deficit hyperactive disorder, because you don't just put them in their room unless you are planning on remodeling the room after you come back, because it will be completely destroyed or they will escape through the window. Okay. So you obviously don't have a child with attention deficit disorder. And so I talk about that in the book, and that was really fun. But what I wanted to say was, if any of you are interested in receiving a free copy of this book, what you have to do is just drop me a line, send me an email, gogreydame@gmail.com, and I'll send you a free copy of the book. I'd love it if you would subscribe. As I say along the banner at the bottom of this, I am not a nonprofit organization. I am not doing this for financial gain. I am doing this because I love doing this. So I'm not asking for your money, but what I am asking for is your like, subscribe, and share. The more subscribers I have, the more vision this podcast will receive, and the more I will be able to bring on really fabulous people, very similar to the YouTubes that I listen to all the time. For example, one of the people that I would love to have on my podcast is Dr. Tina Moore. She is a naturopath from Portland, Oregon, and she is one of the physicians that is standing out talking about the new diagnosis of Alzheimer's being called diabetes type 3. She's talking about the new small dose medications that she's giving to treat insulin resistance for people. And she really talks about exercise, hormone replacement, and things that women need. And I would love to have her on my show, but I'm just a tiny little show. But the more subscribers I have, the more I can get people like Dr. Tina Moore to come on my show. Now, I've had some amazing people that have been very generous. Reverend Carla and Tim, can't think of his name right now. I've had some amazing people. I've had Matthew Harris. I've had Benjamin Park. I've had fabulous people that have been so gracious to come on this show. But as we move the subject from Mormonism to health and women specifically, the audience is going to dim a little bit, and I need more subscribers. So I'm really asking you to subscribe, like, and share. It's just the way the algorithm works. And it's just so simple. Just boop, subscribe, and you'll get a notification when I'm doing a new podcast. And when you share it with other people, that's how the word gets around. And I love that kind of marketing. My favorite kind of marketing is word of mouth marketing. So that's all I'm asking for you in 2025. Please share this podcast, like, and subscribe. That's all I ask. And so I'd like to close out this year wishing you all a happy new year for 2025. And I hope you will come back and listen. And if you have women in your life that are struggling, menopause I didn't even realize what menopause was when I went through it. I didn't have a lot of crisis type behavior. My body managed to transfer over to old ladyish pretty easily. I didn't have a lot of hot flashes and stuff, but I was also exercising at the time. I was watching my diet at the time. So I have been kind of a health fanatic since I was probably when I started having children was the biggest thing. And I was really concerned for what my children would be eating and what kind of food I would be bringing into the home as a caregiver and as the matriarch of the home. So that's when I really started, my kids never had cold cereal for breakfast, and we didn't allow soda. And, yes, we went to McDonald's because it was right down the street, and Friday nights was busy and we would take them there as a treat. So, we don't totally avoid fun food, but it isn't part of our diet. And my kids have taken that, and it's lovely to see them carry that forward into their lives as adults. So it's been great that way. But anyway, so as I talk about this, it's going to reduce my audience size. I understand that. And I really need to reach the women out there, especially ex-Mormon women who are taking back their lives. They may need to take back their kitchens. And, if you're used to fixing BYU brownies or Campbell's soup in every casserole you've ever made, that's going to be something that's really hard for you to do as the cook and bottle washer in your home when you tell the family, we're not eating like that anymore. And that's not part of Mormonism. To eat well, in spite of the word of wisdom, eating healthy is not part of Mormonism, as shown by the Hulu StreamYard show about the secret lives of Mormon wives and their addiction to swig, which is poison. Okay. It is poison. And so is crumble cookies. I hate to tell you this, crumble cookies and swig are poison. So when you leave the church, you also have to leave swig and crumble cookies. Okay. That may be the hardest part of leaving the Mormon church. So thank you again for joining me. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait. January 1, my first podcast of 2025, I'm going to be interviewing Lila Tuller, who has a fabulous new book out about dating after 50. That's part of being visible. We're going to talk about it. If any of you watch The Golden Bachelorette, it's a scary world out there for those women who are single, especially over the age of 50. And Lila's going to be sharing her knowledge with us. We're going to be talking about dating over 50, January 1st, 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Join me on She Became Visible. Thank you so much, and have a happy new year. Bye-bye.